Welcome to another edition of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going over UFC 265, headlined by an interim heavyweight scrap between Cyril Gane and Derek the Black Beast Lewis, co-headlined by Pedro Munoz against Jose Aldo. Very excited for a ton of fights on this card. We were supposed to get Amanda Nunes co-headlining against Juliana Pena. I believe Nunes catches COVID, and they pushed that fight back. Not entirely sure when they're rescheduling it to, but we still have a pretty good offering of fights from the UFC this weekend, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Shout out to all the supporters already that have clicked that subscribe and have clicked that like as well, because that's always very important, especially to kind of just boost the stuff on the YouTube side of things. And obviously, if you're listening to this on Apple iTunes, drop a review for your boy. Who knows? Maybe in the very near future, I'll start off one of these episodes by reading one of the reviews from you guys. So if you guys haven't already, give me as many stars as you guys believe I deserve, and then drop a written review as well. Just a brief little thing in terms of what you like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast, and what I could possibly do better. And I'd be definitely sure to heed those words from you guys. So shout out to you guys. Let's just start off with the recap for the last event, as we always do. If you guys know, transparency is obviously number one. I know I'm not the greatest out there doing that in terms of units profited or anything like that, but I still believe that my reads are solid, and I hope to bring some more solid picks to you guys this weekend. All right. Let's start off with the dog of the night. Kind of shit the bed right there, right? 1 unit bet on the under 2.5 in the Gritzmacher and Garcia fight. That blows up in our face. Gritzmacher shows solid durability, and Garcia shows good enough gas tank that he could survive, because it seemed like there were plenty of times that Gritzmacher could go out there and get the finish if he just put his foot on the gas a little bit more. But that really bursted a lot of parlays for people. Not the under 2.5, but the Garcia side of things. And that's just further attribution to the fact that we shouldn't put too much weight on guys that are just coming off of knockout victories, assuming that they're going to go out there and get knocked out once again. Under 2.5 whiffs there. But the lock of the night play comes through. 4.5 units on Cheyenne buys. She goes out there and absolutely floors Gloria DePaulo with a beautiful kick, and then eventually follows up with some ground and pound and gets the finish, gets her out of there in the first round. Not a lot of people expecting her to get the first round KO, but I know a lot of people that were on the decision prop instead, but I felt like the line on her, I believe I got her at -175. I felt that was too disrespectful considering the skill gap that we had in that fight, but we totally didn't get to see it, right? We saw not long of that fight. I wish that fight went a little bit more so we could see, our reads kind of play out a little bit more. But we did see Cheyenne Buys from the get-go push the pace, stay in Gloria DePaulo's face, and really make it difficult for her to get to her own game going. So, maybe that was just the beginning of the end right there for Gloria DePaulo. But regardless, Bays gets the finish, 4.5 units on -175 cashes for 2.57 units, which allows us to end the event at +1.57 units. So a great bounce back for us, especially after losing the lock of the night play the previous week with Ian Heiner sitting in the bed, even though our dogs did very well with Darren Elkins and Halian Paiva hitting. A lot of underdogs barking on this card as well. I believe I went 6-3 on predictions. I got to count it up again, but I did pretty well for the fact that we had 6 underdogs actually ended up cashing as well. So I thought that was a pretty good showing, at least from a prediction side of things. And then obviously to come out on profit and avoid the landmines of the Garcias and the Barbaretas and still cash on a girl like Cheyenne Buys, I thought that was pretty impressive. So hopefully this is the beginning of a new streak where we're able to hit the double digits once again, as I did, beginning of the year, late last year. But yeah, hoping that's what we can do. So like I said, +1.57 units on UFC Vegas 33, which rolls us right into UFC 265. I already have my lock of the night play posted on the Patreon. It will be dropping for free to the public on Friday. Usually I drop that just after I do the Ultimate Weigh-In show. I'm going to be doing the Ultimate Weigh-In show a little bit early this week because I'm actually flying out to see the in-laws this week. So my flight's like 8 p.m. Eastern time. I normally do my show 9 p.m. Eastern time, but I'm going to be looking to do it probably earlier, maybe right after the weigh-ins actually finish off. I can't confirm my guests as of yet, but as soon as I can, I promise I'll tell you guys. And if I have 2 guys that I'm looking at, And if they both can confirm, I promise you it's going to be a heater of an episode that you guys are not going to want to miss. I want to roll that into the Patreon. Obviously, like I said, Lock of the Night Play already placed on the Patreon. Thursday afternoon, I'm intending on releasing my best bets and props article where I go over every single fight and give you guys my best bet and prop along with my confidence rating on those plays as well. So a lot of people enjoy that. That's probably one of my biggest things on the Patreon outside of the Discord community, which is just absolutely amazing. Shout out to all the Patreon members that continue to show support on a month-to-month basis. I'm just stumbling through the intro here, but we'll make it. 400 plus patrons. I'm happy to kind of linger around that number. I know I got to get a streak going and get some dubs under my belt to continue to move towards that 500 mark. But the fact that we're able to dabble around 400 is just absolutely amazing. And I cannot thank you guys for the support enough. So once again, check out the Patreon. Link is in the description below. A ton of great perks. But Discord community is probably one of my favorites that I'm able to give to you guys. Secondly, Coolbet, coolbet.com, promo code MMALOTN2. That's a promo code for Coolbet. If you guys sign up, though, match your initial deposit up to $200, and from there, you can go out there and bet on whatever you want for Coolbet. They have great lines. They have great odds. They allow you to parlay props as well, if that's something up your alley. But I really do lean on them to get some solid odds. And they have great customer service. Haven't had any issues in terms of limiting or anything yet. But we'll see how that goes as I continue to play with them. But I do have nothing but good things to say about those guys. So once again, Coolbet, coolbet.com. Use promo code MMALOTN2 and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. Last thing I want to say, shout out to the Yadong and Florian podcast. I just got my shirt a couple days ago, so I wanted to rep it for the podcast here. I did order another thing from Annick's thing that he has online, so I can't wait for that one to come into the mail, and then I'll start repping that too. But shout out to the Yadong and Florian podcast. Love those guys. Been on the show twice. It's been a while now, but Annick just hit me up recently through Twitter saying that it's just a matter of time to get you back onto the Yadong and Florian podcast. So very much looking forward to getting some exposure with those guys once again. All right, that's a wrap. I know you guys are here for the breakdowns. Breakdowns are coming right up. Good luck on your bets this weekend. And I'll see you guys on the flip side for the outro. But enjoy the breakdowns for now. Johnny Munoz Jr. versus Jamie Simmons. We got minus 255 on Johnny Munoz, and we got plus 215 on Jamie Simmons. Let's start off on the Johnny Munoz side, who's a highly credentialed BJJ black belt. I believe his father was a black belt as well. He was pretty much born on the mats, and it pretty much has shown throughout the beginning parts of his career. He's going out there, taking guys down and submitting them relatively easily, or finding a ground and pound finish as well. He did incur his first ever loss his last time out against Nate Maness. That was a fight where he had tremendous success in the first round, grounding the fight. But then after that, Nate Maness seemed to take over. And especially given that point deduction in the third round for Johnny Munoz, the writing was pretty much already on the wall. But Nate Maness did enough, in my opinion, to win the next two rounds. Close fight, especially that second round. But I do think that Maness did enough good job to go out there and get the W via decision in that fight. But Johnny Munoz, we know what he needs to do. He needs to drag fights to the ground and get his jiu-jitsu game going and potentially find a sub. Jamie Simmons, on the other hand, a former high school wrestler, I believe he's a college wrestler as well, has some decent accolades on his record, and then transitioned over MMA. And before his UFC debut, which he took on short notice against Giga Chikadze, he had a 7-2 record where he was going out there and really utilizing his wrestling, grapple fucking his opponents, getting some TKOs, getting a couple of submissions as well. But it seemed like the majority of his fights he needed to ground to be able to get the victory. My question mark here is against Johnny Munoz. Is that really going to be the most effective move? As I do think that he's going to fall into some trouble here going up against a guy like Munoz, who has a great jiu-jitsu game, like I said. I believe Jamie Simmons is training out of the same gym as Ode Osbourne, who fights later on this card as well. And they train out of Pura Vida. I believe that's another gym that's out there in Milwaukee. Another guy from that team is Zach Otto. And it seems like, their BJJ should be up to par, but I do think that Simmons will fall into some trouble if he tries to go out there and grapple fuck Munoz in this position. Munoz has great reversals, good sweeps, decent takedowns. I'd be surprised if he lands an early takedown here against Jamie Simmons. Not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but I'd be surprised if the college and high school wrestler and Jamie Simmons gives up a takedown early in this fight, but it could absolutely happen. There's a reason that Johnny Munoz is the minus 255 favorite. Now, striking wise, I think that Munoz has a little bit more in the arsenal in terms of variety of strikes, whereas Jamie Simmons is more of like a regular wrestling type of striker, which is go out there, throw winging bombs, blitzing bombs, just trying to do enough to kind of close the distance and then eventually look for the takedown and get this fight to the ground. But I think Munoz might be inviting the takedown in this fight. I'd be surprised if he tries to put up too much of a fight in terms of takedown defense if Simmons decides to take this fight to the ground. But I think once it hits there, I think that we'll see Munoz get the better of this fight. I'm not the most impressed with Simmons' ability to kind of control his opponents on top, especially with the lack of experience that he was, or lack of experienced fighters that he was fighting on the regional scene. You know, he was able to get away with it there, and some of those guys had success in terms of getting fights back to the feet. But here against Munoz is going to want the fight on the ground. He's going to want to sweep Jamie Simmons or find a submission off of his back, and I think it's going to be absolutely possible that he can do that. So I'm actually going to go with Johnny Munoz in this spot. I think that he's a good enough all around. He might give up takedowns, but again, that's going right into his realm. But I do think that the longer that this fight goes, he might even have more in the tank. I do question Jamie Simmons' gas tank a little bit too. So I do think that if this fight does get stretched later into the second and third rounds, we should have Munoz be more successful in terms of implementing his jiu-jitsu heavy game plan. So I'm going to be going with Johnny Munoz in this spot. I think he's worth the chalk minus 255. Some people might be looking at the other side just to try to get some value on Simmons, but I don't really think Simmons is much of a UFC caliber fighter. He could potentially win some titles on the regional scene, but I do think that he's going to run into trouble, especially with a stylistic nightmare here that he has against Johnny Munoz. So I'm going to go Munoz. I'm going to go Munoz probably second round submission, and he should be able to lock this up without taking too much damage. I think Simmons' best ability to win this fight is probably knocking out Simmons early in this fight or getting some vicious ground and pound going early, because again, as this fight drags on, I do think that Simmons will struggle to keep up with his submission attempts, reversal attempts, and all of that. That's going to be coming from Johnny Munoz. So once again, I'm going to go Johnny Munoz via second round submission. Victoria Leonardo against Melissa Gatto. We got an even lined fight here, minus 110 on either side. Victoria Leonardo actually opened up as the plus 125 underdog, and since then we've seen some steady money come in, pushing her to a pick'em odds pretty much. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she actually ends up going off as the favorite once the fight actually goes off, as I do believe that she does deserve to be the favorite in this spot. So shout out to everybody that was able to get in on Victoria Leonardo early on this spot to take advantage of the misprice, I believe, on the opener at least. So let's start off with Victoria Leonardo, who's obviously coming off a loss to Menifield last time around. Field was just absolutely way better than her in the striking round, and it was obvious from the get-go. We did see Field almost get her out of there in the late first round, and then eventually getting her out of there midway through the second round. We definitely saw that, again, huge advantage in the striking for Field in that spot. Leonardo was just doing her best in terms of just trying to survive, it seemed like. The Chelsea Hackett fight, the Contender Series fight, if you guys remember, Chelsea Hackett was absolutely chewing up the lead leg of Victoria Leonardo, and then in the second round, Leonardo turned the tables, dragged this fight to the ground, and then eventually got that full mount and TKO'd her way to a contract to the UFC. So great win for her there, especially as a plus 235 underdog, defying the odds and taking over and really stopping the hype train that was Chelsea Hackett on the Contender Series. Now here, Victoria Leonardo, in my opinion, has a much more favorable matchup going up against a 6-0-2 Melissa Gatto, who's only 25 years old, but has had so much troubles in terms of trying to get to the cage due to the fact that, she's had a bunch of fights where she's had to pull out. She had to deal with the USADA suspension, which is not the greatest look, especially before your first ever UFC fight. And it's been a long time since she actually went out there and submitted Carol Hossa, which I believe was way back in 2018. And I'm actually going to quickly confirm that number or that date for you guys, as I should have had that information ready to go before I hit record on this. But yeah, she beat Carol Hossa September of 2018. Then she was scheduled to fight an Immortal. That got pulled. Then she was scheduled to fight at UFC 237, which was the Nami Yunus and Andrade card against Talita Bernardo. She pulls out due to an injury. Then 2 months later, she was scheduled again. She has another injury where she was supposed to go up against Julia Avila. And then she was scheduled a year later, June of 2020, against Maria Agapova. And then Gatto was pulled due to travel restrictions. But within that spot, though, she did have to deal with a USADA suspension, which is obviously, again, not the greatest look for somebody that is just coming into the UFC. Gatto seems to be a jiu-jitsu player. She wants to drag the fights to the ground, get her jiu-jitsu going. That's how she was able to get out Carol Hossa in that fight. She was able to pull off a Kimura. Actually, that was a spot where Carol Hossa went for a takedown, and she wasn't cognizant enough of her arm, and we saw Gatto lock up a Kimura and was able to get the victory off of her back. So good win from her there. But the Sydney Hocha fight was an interesting one. I thought Hocha won that, not completely understanding of why it went to a draw, but Hocha was getting the better of her by getting the fight to the ground, landing some good shots on the feet, and even in the striking realm, all it seemed that Gatto had was a leg kick. There wasn't really much else because it did look like she wanted to drag the fight to the ground, but whenever she tried to tie up, Sydney Hocha seemed like the much stronger opponent in that situation, and she was able to drag the fight to the ground. I'm expecting her to do the same thing here against Leonardo in terms of, clinching up with Leonardo, dragging the fight to the ground and get her game going that way. But Leonardo, solid. I believe she's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, shows some solid work on the ground, but she does a good job in terms of, fighters that want to take the fight to the ground. She does a decent job of keeping it in the striking realm. The Liz Tracy fight is a perfect example of that. Even the Erin Blanchfield fight, but Blanchfield did a good job in terms of just committing to her striking, then eventually finding that knockout in the second round. Unless Melissa Gatto has a head kick of some sort, which I haven't seen on tape, I think she's going to struggle in the striking realm here against Victoria Leonardo, because, a leg kick will only be able to take you so far. She's going to have to start trusting her hands a little bit more, but once she starts getting punched in the face like she's going to be getting from Victoria Leonardo, I don't think she'll have as much in the tank in terms of resistance in that spot. Again, I think the best way for Gatto to have success in this fight is to drag it to the ground. I think she's going to struggle to do so, and I think that Leonardo will be able to stay out of any bad positions on the ground, and then actually maybe even get some reversals, land up on top, and get some ground and pound going from the top position. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we see Leonardo get Gatto out of there the later that this fight goes. So I'm going to be circling the round 3 prop here for Leonardo because I do think she has a decent gas tank. She should have a better gas tank than Gatto in my opinion, and she just pretty much has it covered everywhere else. I think she's the better striker. She has great kicks, and then even when this fight hits the ground, I think her submission defense is good enough to stay out of trouble. And I do think that it could come down to Gatto gassing later in this fight, Leonardo landing some takedowns of her own, and then getting better position and possibly getting a TKO via ground and pound. So I do like Leonardo in this spot. She should be the rightful favorite, and I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up going off as a favorite once the fight actually goes down. But I do like her here early in fight week. I'm going to take her to win this fight via TKO, and I'm going to say it happens in round 3. Anderson Dos Santos versus Miles Johns. We got plus 155 on Dos Santos and minus 175 on Miles Johns. Miles Johns coming off a very successful return, especially after getting his first ever loss, pro career loss, I should say, where he got finished by Mario Bautista. And then he comes back and gets a win over Kevin Natividad, finishing him in the third round in a fight where it looked like he was trying to ground the fight over and over again, but was very unsuccessful, as Kevin Natividad did a good job in terms of keeping the fight upright, up against the cage, but he was giving up a bunch of control time, as well as eating damage from Miles Johns, who was on the offensive for pretty much the majority of that fight. As we saw in the third round, a little bit of a blatant glove grab to keep Kevin Natividad within range, and Miles Johns was able to uncork an absolute nuclear bomb on Natividad, which ended up finishing him there. But good win for Miles Johns to get back on track, but it does feel like this fight against Anderson Dos Santos will be even tougher for him to overcome. Anderson Dos Santos, it seems like, he was getting into that territory of a guy that you can continuously fade with some good talent, but now it seems like he's completely engulfing himself and accepting the fact that when he creates chaos, he's able to get more success against his opponents. And that's exactly what he was able to do against Martin Day last time around. Successfully landed a takedown, but creating chaos on the ground. We saw Martin Day get back to his feet, but for some reason, Martin Day goes out there and tries to go Daniel Cormier on his ass, leaving his neck out there, and Anderson Dos Santos locking up a submission choke and getting that guillotine choke victory for himself. So good win for him there. But he is very good in the fire. Like, he likes to throw wildly because he doesn't care about getting taken down, because he can rely on his jiu-jitsu, which is good enough, I believe, to find the submission every now and then. But I do think that he's going to struggle here in terms of getting that off early. Which leads me to my next point, which is I think that Miles Johns is going to have to deal with the chaos and the forward pressure of Anderson here, which should gas him a little bit earlier, which should give Anderson dos Santos some more success the later that this fight goes. The later it goes, the better it is for Anderson dos Santos, in my opinion. I think the earlier it is, Miles Johns probably gets that knockout, but I do think that dos Santos is durable enough to withstand that and then eventually come back in the last later rounds and finish him. Now, another fight that's kind of similar to what Miles Johns could potentially put onto Anderson dos Santos is the Nad Narimani fight. The difference between Nad Narimani and Miles Johns is it seems like Narimani has a little bit more to his striking game than what Miles Johns brings to the table. Miles Johns is a little bit more of that wrestler type of striker, which is wild looping hooks, one and done type of things. Just try to, put that power on his opponents to kind of just get them to move back and give them some hesitancy in terms of going forward, especially with the power that's going to be coming their way from Miles Johns, whereas Nad Narimani was kind of picking apart dos Santos for the majority of that first round with the striking, with a little bit more of a varied attack. That's when after Nad Narimani in the second and third rounds, that's when he starts landing the takedowns and grinding out Anderson dos Santos. Whereas with Miles Johns, if he looks to start taking him down later, he's going to gas himself a little bit more. He's going to get into those desperation modes. And we know with these wrestlers, once they start getting desperate, they go back to their old habits. They go back to their immediate reflex. And that reflex for Miles Johns is to shoot. You don't want to just nakedly shoot on a guy like Anderson dos Santos, who doesn't mind pulling guillotine and more often than not has a very nasty guillotine that he could potentially get you to tap out with or go to sleep with. So I do like dos Santos to actually survive that first round here and start getting his game going in the second and third rounds, landing the bigger shots, putting Miles Johns into desperation mode, and then eventually finding a submission. So the spots that I like, dos Santos inside the distance, dos Santos by submission, and then dos Santos in round 3, as I do think that those are the best spots for dos Santos to win this fight. And yeah, I like the underdog here. I like dos Santos to win this fight via third round submission. Ode Osbourne versus Kape. We got minus 185 on Kape and plus 160 on the up-and-comer Ode Osbourne. And this is a big fight for Osbourne, especially to get a win like Kape on his record this early. Well, 12 fights into his career, 13 fights into his career is going to be a very good, stamp of approval for him, especially at 29 years of age. Now, on the flip side, you got Kape, who's only 27 himself, but has a wealth of experience, especially with the amount of fights that he was able to get over there in Rizin, not to mention the amount of fights, but the level of competition that he was going up against over there. Very, very good look for him, especially capping it off with a win over Kai Asakura, knocking him out pretty viciously as well. Then he makes his UFC debut against Alexandre Pantoja. Seems to be a little bit too lackadaisical in there, right? Happy that he's finally in the UFC, but never really gets much going in that fight, which is why, in my opinion, Pantoja deserved to get that decision and take home that victory. Then his next fight against Mateus Nicolau, was 1-1 going into that third round, and I thought that the early in the round, it looked like Nicolau was getting the better of the damage and the better of the striking exchanges. But as the momentum started to swing towards Kape, I just feel as though he didn't have enough time in that round to truly get it going. Now we got an 0-2 Kape that's probably pissed off at the 2 decisions that he's lost, and he has a good opponent in front of him here against Ode Osbourne, where he should be able to go out there and do what Kape does. I do think that Osbourne, again, I've said it before, I think he has a little bit of a cardio issue, but we haven't truly seen it, especially in his recent fights since he's able to get his opponents out of there, or he was submitted relatively quickly by Brian Kelleher as well. But I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get a guy like Kape out of there as quickly as he has his last couple of opponents. So the longer that this fight drags on, you got to believe that Kape has the advantage. But the issue is Kape going to throw? Is Kape going to be trigger shy? Is he just going to be dancing and doing his bullshit? I believe no. I believe the fact that he knows that he's 0-2, an 0-3 record in the UFC is probably going to get him caught right away. So we should probably see him go out there with a little bit more fire in his belly, a little bit more aggressiveness, and that could really help him out in a spot like this where he's going to have to close the distance, where he's giving up 5 inches of reach against a very long Ode Osbourne, not to mention a 2-inch height advantage. I don't believe Osbourne does the greatest job in terms of maintaining that distance, so I think that Kape will do a good job in terms of exploding, getting on the inside, and getting his combinations off. But I do think that he also has the power to go out there and possibly knock out Osbourne. Osbourne is a little bit wild on the feet, holds his hands a little bit low. Obviously, going up against a very formidable opponent like Kape, he's going to have to mind his P's and Q's a little bit more, which I expect him to do. But I don't think that he's going to be ready for the type of striking that's going to be coming his way from a guy like Kape. And even if Osbourne decides to drag this fight to the ground and pull off a submission like he did on the Contender Series, or try to get a submission going off of his back, I think he's going to really struggle here against Kape, who I believe is either a brown belt or a black belt at this point in time in jiu-jitsu. So I do think that his submission defense will be up to par. Not to mention, I think he went up against two much tougher submission artists in Nicolau and Pantoja and was able to come out unscathed on the ground, even though he ended up losing that fight via decision. Pre-tape and early in the week, I was leaning Ode Osbourne as a potential dog of the night play here. Excuse me. But as fight week dragged on, I started to do the tape myself. I started to like the number that we were seeing on Manel Kape, or at least what I was seeing on tape about Manel Kape. I do think that he's going to go out there and outstrike Ode Osbourne on this in this fight. I do think that his takedown defense will be good enough to keep this fight upright. I do think if he decides to take this fight to the ground, Ode Osbourne's takedown defense leaves a lot to be desired, and I think that he'll have a lot of success in terms of grounding this fight and getting some strikes off from the top position, and then being good enough to and defensively sound with his jiu-jitsu to stay out of the submission attempts of Ode Osbourne. Osbourne could absolutely blast onto the scene and be this next big thing. He seems to have all the physical abilities and the physical traits that are required for a champion, and some decent technical things as well. But I do think that he's going to have some issues here dealing with the striking style of Manel Kape, and I think he's truly going to struggle. Again, does he submit him? I don't think so. Does he knock Kape out? Kape has a really good chin at least recently. His durability has really held up. And again, back against the wall for Manel Kape here. He needs a W. He could absolutely get cut if he goes 0-3 in this spot. I know he's, if I'm not mistaken, he's doing the UFC a favor by taking this fight on somewhat short notice. I could be off on that, but regardless, I do think that Manel Kape should have all the advantages of this fight, and his durability should be able to hold up against a very volatile Ode Osbourne. So the spots I'm going to be looking at is the under 2.5 is not going to be a bad spot. Let me see what the odds are there. Under 2.5 is plus 110. Not a bad spot with two guys that have a lot of finishes on the record. Could be potentially my dog of the night play as well, now that I'm thinking about it. But I do like Kape here. I think he gets a knockout, probably second round. But yeah, I love Manel Kape in this spot. And I think we're going to see a different Manel, a fired up Manel, which would produce a pretty fun knockout for us. So once again, I'm going to go Manel Kape, second round KO. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Jessica Penne. We got minus 120 on the returning poll, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and we got plus 100 on Jessica Penne. Let's start off on the Penne side of things, who took home, I believe it was a split decision victory over Lupita Godinez last time around when she made a return after about 3 or 4 years off due to USADA suspensions and just a plethora of other things. But luckily for her, she was able to get her hand raised when she did make her return at the ripe age of 38 years old. So good win for Jessica Penne last time around. Very weird fight, right? You saw that Lupita Godinez really needed the distance and the pure striking space required for a striker like herself to have success. Yet she just always crashed forward, ended up in the clinch, and just made it a lot closer of a fight than it should have been. Say what you want about the decision. I'm not here to argue that Penne still went out there and got the job done, even as a plus 210 underdog. So she probably was, the side to end up going with, considering the odds and how close that fight ended up playing out. Regardless, we know that Penne needs to engage in the grappling to have any sort of success, as her striking game still has not developed, even though she's at 38 years old at this point. She has to go out there and get takedowns, use her jiu-jitsu, which is very crafty. We've seen her pull off crazy subs in the past, but I do think that she's going to need to really emphasize that here against a girl like Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who will absolutely have her beat on the feet. Now, on the flip side with Karolina, we're coming back after, I believe, she fought last time we saw her in the cage was February of last year, where she got a decision by Yan Xiaonan, but that was a fight where she was getting pretty much beat from pillar to post, and it was actually close to being stopped due to the swelling that was coming up on Karolina's eye, not to mention the amount of damage that she was taking in the eye. I believe like one of the tear ducts or something ruptured or something like that, but it just kept leaking, and it was a very huge nuisance for her, especially having to deal with a killer like Yan Xiaonan in front of her. We know know when Carolina's at her best, she can go out there and strike with the best of them. She can go and, throw up 100, 120, 130 strikes and really just put the pace and pressure on her opponents, especially when she's really in her groove in the striking realm. I think she's going to need all of that here against the longer and grapple-heavy Jessica Penne, but I do think that we'll see her have a successful return, as I do think that her striking is good enough to put a hurting on Jessica Penne and make it very difficult for Penne to get that grappling going. We know, the fragility of Jessica Penne's nose, who did have it broken way back when she fought against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but it does seem to open up pretty easily, especially when you have a fighter as pertinent with their striking as Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Even Lupita Godinez, I believe, had some success in terms of busting that nose. I do think that was have the same thing here with Carolina, using that jab and then coming down the middle with that two to really put the hurting on Jessica Penne, and I think we're going to see her have plenty of success doing so. There is a little bit of room for concern regarding the layoff that Miss Kowalkiewicz is coming back from, but I think it was a good amount of time for her to take off, especially considering that she was coming off of a 4-fight losing streak, and one of those fights being completely knocked out by Jessica Andrade. So I think she has her stuff back together. She's 35 years old. She wants to make one last run. And I think stylistically speaking, the UFC is doing her a favor here, especially fighting a girl like Jessica Penne, who doesn't present too many issues outside of the grappling realm, which I've seen Carolina, do a pretty good job in terms of fending off submission attempts. And I do believe that, even though she's been taken down in the past, again, especially against a girl like Michelle Waterson is a very underrated wrestler in my opinion, which is why she was able to complete those takedowns to a lot of people's surprise. I do think that Carolina might have give up a couple takedowns here to Jessica Penne, but I believe she should be able to get back to her feet and then inflict enough damage on the feet to kind of sway the judges back to her side. I'm not even ruling out the potential that we could see a Karolina Kowalkiewicz possible TKO, and the fact that I do think that she could overwhelm Jessica Penne on the feet, but as long as she stays disciplined enough, keeps her movement and footwork in check, she should be able to stay out of the clinch positions that Penne is going to be seeking and just absolutely unload on her with some striking. So I'm split between, a decision for Karolina and a possible TKO prop, but at plus 900 or plus 950, I might have to take a little bit of a stab on that TKO prop, but again, not high level of confidence. That number is just too juicy for me. So ultimately, I'm going to be going with Karolina Kowalkiewicz to win this fight via decision, but I am going to keep a keen eye on that KO prop, and I might have to take a little bit of a stab. She could absolutely be coming back with some fire, want to reverse her fortune, especially with that 1-4 streak that she's currently on. And I think that Jessica Penne is the perfect fighter for her to go out there and reclaim that success that she had earlier in her career. So once again, I'm going to go with Kowalkiewicz, and I'll take her by decision, but I'll be looking at that KO prop as well. Alonzo Menifield versus Ed Herman. We got minus 240 on the hard-hitting Alonzo Menifield and plus 200 on the veteran Ed Herman. Now, intriguing fight to break down to, a certain extent. Obviously, we know that Menifield has somewhat limited path to victory, which is usually that one first-round knockout. It probably is the way to go in this fight against the veteran Ed Herman. Now, last time around, we saw Alonzo Menifield take advantage of a position on the ground against Fabio Cherant, where he was able to lock up Von Preux choke. I'm going to start calling it a Von Preux. Don't give a fuck what anybody says. But he was able to snatch it up and get the tap from Fabio Cherant relatively quickly into their fight. Let's not forget that Fabio Cherant took that fight on short notice, so there is something to consider there. But Alonzo Menifield still should go out there and showcase some solid skills here against Ed Herman. Now, I do believe he's still with Fortis MMA. We don't see him post there much. He is starting to work with this Olympic coach. I'm not exactly sure what, maybe with strength and conditioning, but this coach has been apparently working with a ton of Olympic athletes and a bunch of different, professional sports athletes as well out there in Dallas, Texas. So I wonder what kind of tools he could have picked up from there and how that could eventually help his overall game, because we know that he definitely needs help, especially when fights get out of that first round. He needs that ability to maintain his endurance, maintain his durability, and maintain his cardio so that he can fully go out there and provide a solid 15 minutes of violence if that's what it takes to get his opponents out of there. Ed Herman is tough to put away. That is definitely a very tough cookie to crack. And even though, Mike Rodriguez was very close to getting him out of there, especially with that body shot, and then we know what happened afterward, Ed Herman was able to kind of, sell it as a low blow, and he was able to just get his wits about him, and then he got back into the cage, and then he was able to take over over and get that finish of Mike Rodriguez. But I do think he's going to have a little bit more issues here dealing with the power of Alonzo Menifield, and I think that Menifield will do a really good job in terms of tracking where Ed Herman is and then eventually putting his lights out. I still do believe that Menifield will have a decent run in the light heavyweight division here. You know, it is kind of thin in terms of the level of competition there, how many people are truly there, and I think it's a little bit too early to be writing off a guy like Alonzo Menifield. The last time that we've actually seen Ed Herman get knocked out was July of 2016, the same night that Tyron Woodley captured the welterweight title over Robbie Lawler. He got head kick knocked out by Nikita Krylov, and then his last loss before that was just about a year and a half earlier against Derek Brunson, where he got KO'd 36 seconds into the fight. So we're talking about, you know, close to 5 years now since we've actually seen him get knocked out, but I don't think he's been fighting as heavy of a hitter in that amount of time, right? Like, he lost a split decision to Gilan Vellante, beat Patrick Cummins, beat Khadisi Ibragimov, and then was close to getting finished by Mike Rodriguez, so possibly could have gotten finished, you know, the last time he was out, but now here he is against Alonzo Menifield, where, you know, it's tough to see him at 40 years old, coming into his 40th fight, that he's going to be able to deal with the power of a young up-and-comer like Alonzo Menifield. So, you know, I don't want anything to do with this fight in terms of betting pre-fight. You know, it's really tough to trust a guy like Alonzo Menifield, who's, you know, above minus 200, minus 240, who should go out there and get it done within one round. But what if he doesn't get it done in one round? Ed Herman definitely has those veteran skills to push this fight further and really take advantage of the deeper the fight goes. But I still find it hard to believe that he's going to pull out a victory over a guy like Alonzo Menifield. So I'm still going to take Menifield round 1 KO. But if you guys are into the live betting thing, I would probably take a little bit of a sprinkle on Ed Herman should this fight reach the second round. You're probably going to get way better odds than you're getting pre-fight, and then you should also, you know, have a little less to worry about in terms of the KO power coming Ed Herman's way from Alonzo Menifield. But I still do think that Menifield will find that chin in the first round. I think he'll get him out of there in the first round. So my final prediction for this fight, even though I'll have no action pre-fight, is going to be Menifield via round 1 KO. Vince Morales versus Draco Rodriguez. We got minus 105 for Vince Morales and minus 115 for Draco Rodriguez. Very closely lined fight. I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty much minus 110 or minus 115 either way come fight time here, because pre-fight it looks like it could be a close fight. Now, I kind of said that before Vince Morales' last fight against Chris Gutierrez, where I'm like, you know, both guys don't really show much urgency, and I do think that both guys are, you know, lined pretty well at that minus, I believe it was, minus 120 is as high as Chris Gutierrez got. But, you know, I thought pre-fight it was going to be a pretty close fight throughout, but Chris Gutierrez laid on those calf kicks nice and early in this spot, and he was able to immobilize Vince Morales, eventually getting him out of there via leg kick TKO. Not often do you see that, but Chris Gutierrez did a really good job in terms of nullifying the footwork of Vince Morales by slowing him down with those calf kicks, and then eventually getting him out of there with those calf kicks as well. When Vince Morales is truly on, his best work usually comes from his boxing. He has good footwork, good movement as well, and he's able to kind of, you know, punch guys into traps almost, and then start to capitalize from that. Not a crazy, you know, heavy one-punch knockout kind of guy, but is still able to go out there and put some solid volume on his opponents, and, you know, find success in those spots. Now, he's been out of the cage for over a year now. I believe he had some health issues to deal with, but now he's back ready to go, and I feel like he's energized, especially after an 0-2 run in his last 2 fights. He wants to go out there and definitely get a W to reverse those fortunes. I will also say this, though, his Benito Lopez fight was very intriguing, as I thought that Vince Morales probably won every single round in that fight. Maybe you give Benito Lopez one of those rounds, but it looks like it came down to a kick-heavy game plan versus a punch-heavy game plan, and for some reason the judges ended up scoring the leg kick-heavy game plan. But even if you guys go on MMA decisions, it shows that pretty much all media members and the vast majority of fans scoring on that website showcased that Vince Morales deserved to win that fight. So I feel very bad for him, you know, having a win like that kind of taken away from him. But maybe that fires him up to try to, you know, get some more knockout power or get some more aggressiveness to really sway the judges, or at least keep the judges out of it and go out there and get a decision victory or a knockout victory. Here against Draco Rodriguez, Rodriguez seems to do his best work when he's able to get his opponents to the ground, but he does have a decent striking game as well. I do think he will struggle, though, with the footwork and the hand speed of Vince Morales in this spot, and I do think that Draco Rodriguez at times seems a little bit lost on the feet. As we saw last time around when he got knocked out by Ayman Zahabi as a minus 210 favorite, not a lot of people were expecting him to go down that easily, but he did. Ayman Zahabi found the perfect shot, put him down, and followed up with a couple ground and pound strikes, but he was pretty much done by the time he landed that first strike to put Draco Rodriguez down. I think Vince Morales will find similar success, maybe not to the point of actually getting Draco Rodriguez out there, but he does have to find, some confidence in the fact that a guy like Ayman Zahabi was able to go out there, outstrike, and then eventually put away Draco Rodriguez. And that's not a shot at Ayman Zahabi, not at all. This is a guy that Vince Morales already has a win over. So if Ayman Zahabi can do it, maybe Vince Morales can do it as well. I'm not in the business of MMA math in this spot, so I'm not going to be making a wager on Vince Morales just because they share a similar opponent that Vince has a win over compared to Draco, who got knocked out by that guy, especially in his last fight. But it is definitely something good to kind of fuel the confidence if you were to make a wager on Vince Morales in this spot. So I don't want to spend too much more time on this fight. I do like Vince Morales to make a comeback victory here. I do think that what I mean by comeback is from the health issues and the surgeries and stuff that he had to go through. And then obviously, being on an 0-2 skid now, I do think he has the chops to go out there and beat a guy like Draco Rodriguez. I'd be surprised if Draco is successful with this takedown heavy game plan that I think he's going to be coming with here. And even if he does get the takedowns, I think that we'll see Morales get back to his feet and get back to his game plan of just letting his hands go and really just stifling the forward pressure of Draco Rodriguez. So I like Morales here, like him by decision on the feet, but no big confidence on the spot. But I still do favor Morales to win this fight via decision. Rafael Fiziev versus Bobby Green. We got plus 240 on the veteran Bobby Green, and we got minus 280 on Rafael Fiziev. Now, the important thing to note here is that Fiziev opened up at minus 150 and got absolutely steamed by the public money to get him up to that minus 300 range. Should I call it the hype tax? I absolutely believe it's the hype tax. Seeing Fiziev go out there and knock out Renato Moicano the way that he did, a lot of people are all over this guy, not to mention the performance that he had against Mark Casey before that too. A lot of people are high on Rafael Fiziev, and, for good reason. I think the guy has a good amount of skills. He's 28 years old, still fleshing out his full game. Was the head striking coach over that Tiger Muay Thai. Seems like Tiger Muay Thai is slowly starting to fall apart. Fiziev has been spending a lot of time down there at Sanford MMA in Florida, and that's definitely going to be good for him, especially to round out the rest of his game, to have great training partners to kind of instill the full MMA game into his arsenal rather than just a Muay Thai that he's been, so highly acclaimed for. Now we're seeing it in, the Mark Casey fight, not so much in the Renato Moicano fight, but it seems like Fiziev is starting to get a good grasp on when to go for takedowns and try to grind his opponents out rather than just going out there and just have a striking battle with them. Like, he might be more superior than his opponents, but in the striking realm, like he was against Mark Casey, but he knows that this is an MMA fight, and to make it as one-sided as possible is the best way to go, and that definitely includes landing takedowns when you need to land takedowns. Now, obviously, he's not going to go out there and try to take down a guy like Moicano, who's much more skilled on the mat, so he made the most of it by landing his shots on the feet and then eventually using that beautiful combination, body shot, headshot, another headshot, puts Renato Moicano's lights out. Kind of puts his lights out. Was it an early stoppage? A little bit, but the aesthetic and the optics of seeing Renato Moicano fall to the mat the way that he did and almost kind of, bounce his head off the mat was not a good look at all. I completely understand why the judge or the referee stopped it, but I wouldn't mind seeing that fight go on a little bit longer. But Fiziev's leg kicks, body kicks are probably the best parts of his game, and I think he's going to need all of that to take on a guy like Bobby Green. Bobby Green, again, coming into this fight as a plus 240 underdog. Not often you see him as a heavy underdog, right? Normally he's the heavy favorite. just over his last 5 fights. Let's look at it. Minus 280 against Thiago Moises last time around, which he ended up losing. Very close fight. Say what you want about that. Minus 340 against Alan Patrick, beats him by decision. Plus 115 dog to Lando Venata. Okay, we'll let that one pass. Minus 270 favorite against Clay Guida. I believe he was a minus 300 favorite against Jim Miller, who he was scheduled to fight last time before I believe he collapsed due to the weight cut during the weigh-ins. And was obviously scratched from that fight. And then obviously it was a plus 135 dog to Francisco Trinaldo. Another fight, close fight, but he ends up losing via decision. The last time Bobby Green was actually finished, I have to dig into this one because it's been a while. But UFC 199, Dustin Poirier knocked him out 3 minutes into the first round. So that's June of 2016 was the last time that Bobby Green was finished in his pro MMA career. I actually want to quickly pull up how many finishes he's actually gotten here. So that are the times that he's lost. He has 2 knockouts and 2 submission losses. Obviously, one of those knockouts being to Dustin Poirier. And then I believe it was Tim Means. Yeah, Tim Means finished him near the ending or at the ending of the second round at King of the Cage back in 2010. And then his submission losses came to David Mitchell and Dan Lozon. So decent, names, good name value on those losses. But still, going up against a guy like Rafael Fiziev, I think he's going to have a lot to worry about here. And I think that he might struggle with the Muay Thai game of Rafael Fiziev. Now, I was doing a podcast earlier this morning. Shout out to my guy Danny Vreeland, I believe his name is. He does the Top Turtle podcast where he does the prelim primer, and he asked me, what if you were Bobby Green's coach, what would you tell him to do to win this fight? And I told him, I'm like, you got to stay in the face of Fiziev, just put your punches together, push the pressure on him, put him on his back foot. Most fighters aren't that great off of their back foot, especially if they have a kick-dominant game. And if Bobby Green can stay in his face, he can make it an ugly fight, a fight that Rafael Fiziev probably hasn't been in within 10 fights compared to the, what is that? This is going to be his 40th pro fight for Bobby Green. He has a ton of experience, has fought in serious killers in the past, and I'm sure he's seen a guy like Rafael Fiziev in the past, but it's just, is the timing correct for Bobby Green to be fighting an up-and-comer like this? Has Fiziev truly achieved that higher level, that higher level of MMA to beat a 34-year-old Bobby Green who's going into his 40th fight? I think he does. But I will say this. I think the line is just a little bit too wide. I thought minus 150 for Fiziev was a lot better. Obviously, if you're backing Fiziev, you're going to be all over that. But in terms of an actual, implied odds, my perceived odds, I don't believe that, Fiziev deserves to be a minus 300 favorite in this spot. This is his toughest fight to date. Say what you want about Moicano. The guy has durability issues. Say what you want about Mark Diakese. I thought he was on a decent run at that time, but he went up against a guy that just knew how to defend against the calf kicks, which is what brought Mark Diakese so much success at that point in his career. So I do think that we'll see Fiziev have success in this spot, though. His body kicks will be very important for him. Leg kicks as well. Slow down Bobby Green and then start to let your hands go as well. But Bobby Green is going to be there from minute 1 to minute 15. So if Fiziev, starts to slow down a little bit the longer this fight goes, it's only going to be bad for him, because I think that Bobby Green is very good at kind of pushing a fighter to his limits. Another thing that Bobby Green's really good at, and which is not, a positive, especially whenever you back him at minus 300 odds, he fights close to his level of competition, and he makes fights closer than they should be, just like he did the Thiago Moises fight, just like he did the Francisco Trinaldo fight. Those are fights that he should go out there and win, but he just fights too close sometimes. And I think it's going to be difficult for him to truly impose his game plan here against a guy like Fiziev. So I like Fiziev in this spot. Am I going to play minus 300 on him? No. I might have him on a couple long shot parlays or something like that, but I don't want to go crazy on him at this number. I think the number is off. I think if you're betting this fight straight, Bobby Green is the side. Even Bobby Green by decision, I don't think is a bad spot. I think that's around plus 450, plus 500. I think that has some value, as I do expect this fight to go the full 15 minutes, but I do like Fiziev in the spot. I do think that we'll see him get comfortable enough, maybe land a couple takedowns, land some strikes, land some leg kicks as he always does, body kicks as well. but I think that he's going to have the more impactful shots. He'll land some takedowns as well. I believe his fight IQ is getting even better. And yeah, he should be able to beat Bobby Green in the spot. At minus 300 though? Nah. I'm good. I'll sit on the sidelines and I'll just appreciate this fight for what it is. And that's a young up-and-comer, somewhat of a young up-and-comer in Fiziev, who's just absolutely nasty, and a wily veteran in Bobby Green, who's just durable and will never go away and has still some very good skills and a good enough game to compete with a guy like Rafael Fiziev. But all in all, I'm going to go Fiziev by decision. I'd be wary of that straight line. Maybe his prop line has a little bit more value. And even on the flip side, prop line on, or the decision line on Bobby Green isn't too bad either. So once again, I'm going Rafael Fiziev via decision. Song Yadong versus Casey Kenney. We got plus 100 on Song Yadong and minus 120 on Casey Kenney. And I am uber excited for this matchup because I love the style clash that we have here. Now, Casey Kenney has been building up this confidence with his striking, and it may have, kind of hurt him in his fight against Dominic Cruz. But then again, even if he decides to go to his wrestling in that fight, like he tried to do a couple times, Dominic Cruz is definitely one of those guys that has an underrated grappling game and wrestling game, but it definitely showed in its full entirety last time around when he fought Casey Kenney, not to mention that last minute takedown he was able to secure in that third round to kind of ensure that he secured that fight. So good work on Dominic Cruz in that fight with Casey Kenney. But Casey is still improving, man. To have a loss to one of the bantamweight goats to Dominic Cruz is not a bad loss, especially even in 2021. People might give him some shit for it, considering, Dominic Cruz knocked out by Henry Cejudo last year, kind of been seen as a guy that's over his peak and past his prime. But it's still a very tough matchup. Dominic Cruz still has that footwork, still has that striking, still has that weird style that still causes opponents confusion. And it definitely confused Casey Kenney still. But Casey Kenney, as he showed, over his run at the Fight Island, beautiful work against Haile Alatang, absolutely ripping the body with leg kicks, and was close to getting him out of there. But Haile Alatang was just not going to be turned away that night, at least in terms of being finished. But Casey Kenney did a really good job in terms of securing the victory there. Then a couple of weeks later, he takes a catchweight fight against Nathaniel Wood. Very fun fight. Both guys, 135ers, obviously. But we saw Casey Kenney go out there and just want to get a quick turnaround. He didn't take any damage at all in that Haile Alatang fight. So luckily, Nathaniel Wood was more than a willing dance partner that night. Again, a couple weeks after Casey Kenney had defeated Haile Alatang. And a great fight, but we did get to see Casey Kenney's striking once again. And then when he needed his grappling, he was able to rely on it. Here against Song Yadong, I don't know how much he's going to want to go out there and strike with him. I'm sure he'll strike to a certain extent, but Song Yadong wants you to engage in the pocket, wants you to engage in the fire, because more often than not, he's the one with the better chin and probably more power. So that's something that Casey Kenney is definitely going to have to worry about. But luckily for Casey, I think he has the cardio and grappling advantage in this fight. So sure, if he wants to go out there and strike for the first round to kind of make Song Yadong think that he's going to strike, then he can go out there in the second and third rounds and start implementing that wrestling advantage that he should have in this fight. I think that Casey Kenney is probably one of the best scramblers inside the UFC, and that definitely helps him bail himself out of certain positions against his opponents, and I think that we're going to see that come into play this weekend when he goes up against Song Yadong. Song had a very frustrating fight last time around against Kyler Phillips, where he just could not track down Kyler, and Kyler was able to do a good Matador impression by just sticking and moving, and not really giving Song Yadong the fight that he needed. The minimum success that we had, or that we saw Song have in that fight, was when he was able to secure a takedown or at least top control in the third round against Kyler Phillips, who had seemed to be slowing down at that point in time. I think Song Yadong kind of slows down in his fights too, so I do think that Casey Kenney, like I said earlier, should have a cardio advantage, and that should help him kind of fuel that wrestling game, especially later in this fight. Like I said, I like Casey here. I think that his improving striking will help him remain competitive in this fight against Song Yadong. And then his movement, speed, and wrestling, not to mention his cardio, should be kind of the nail in the coffin for Song Yadong in this fight. I don't think Casey Kenney is going to finish him. I think the only finish, if it occurs, is probably Song Yadong clipping Casey Kenney and following up with some punches. I don't think we see a submission from either side, but I do like Casey in this fight, man. I think that he's very solid value, even at that minus 120 line that he's currently at. I just think he has Song beat pretty much in every aspect of MMA, other than the striking and the possible power. And I think that Casey's striking is good enough now that he can hang with that power and hang with that striking of Song Yadong, excuse me. Song wants to take your head off, likes to thrive, like I said, in those pocket exchanges. But, Casey Kenney seems to have good enough fight IQ to not get engaged in something like that. Just play enough on the feet and then start implementing that grappling advantage that you're going to have in this fight. And just control Song Yadong, suck the energy and the power out of the muscles of Song so that you can be even more effective the later that this fight gets. I'm not sure at what point we'll see Casey engage in the grappling. I'd be kind of surprised if it was immediately, but I'd say, maybe by halfway through the round or at least later through the first round, he should be able to go out there and either secure a takedown or at least threaten deep enough on a takedown that he knows that he'll be a lot more confident and successful with it the later that the fight goes. So I like Casey Kenney a lot in this spot at -120. I think he's the solid value. I'd actually put him up to maybe -150, -170, because I do think he has a great value. Not to mention, I think he has a great game. He's only getting better as a fighter as his career continues to progress. Whereas Song Yadong, I think we're going to see him start to plateau. If you guys remember early in his career, even before coming to the UFC, the guy used to have absolute wars. Like, I think he's kind of really let his potential fade him by as he was just so, again, too active, too violent in his early fights. I know he's still young and still has a lot of time to grow, but I do think that this might be a case of a fighter that kind of just left it all in the cage a little bit too early before he could truly develop into a great fighter. But I do think that Casey Kenney will still eventually crack that top 5 to 7 mark in the bantamweight division. And I think that this will be a great statement win for him to go out there and get onto that track. So, I like Casey Kenney here. I'm going to take him by decision. And again, I think the odds are, kind of off. I think that Casey Kenney should be a little bit of a bigger favorite in this spot. So I like Kenney here, and I'm going to take him to win this fight via decision. Angela Hill versus Tecia Torres. Now, this is a rematch of a fight that took place at UFC 188. I believe that was June of 2015, where Tecia Torres was able to pick up a decision victory over Angela Hill. Not to mention a very green and young Angela Hill, who at that time only had 3 or 4 professional fights, which did not include that time that she had on Tough, which she probably got into the house a little bit too early, but luckily enough for her, her skills have started to pan out, and now she finds herself in the UFC, and she's in a much better position than she was when she originally fought Tecia Torres. Now, Tecia Torres back then also fought a lot of tough competition earlier on in her career, not to mention girls like Rose Namajunas, who I believe she got her win over, but again, super early in their careers. We're talking about 2015, over 6 years ago. But since that amount of time, both women have had different career trajectories, and both women have made a ton of good improvements. But I do think that we're going to see the improvements from the Hill side shine a little bit more than the Torres side. Now, Torres in that fight decided to go out there and grapple fuck Angela Hill, and she was very successful in doing so. But I do think now we're going to see a ton more of improvements from Tecia Torres from Angela Hill. I will say this: I believe I did the calculations real quick, and I believe it was 7 out of 24 takedown attempts since 2016. Angela Hill has been able to stuff, and it would be even crazier if we took into consideration the fight with Michelle Waterson, which I excluded from that statistic, where Michelle Waterson went 1 of 18 on takedown attempts. Again, Michelle Waterson, undersized, underrated wrestler, I'll give that to her, but again, going 1 of 18 on takedowns against Angela Hill is very concerning. I do expect that to be the game plan from Tecia Torres once again. I think she's going to struggle to kind of track Angela Hill on the feet and really get a striking game going, so I do think that she's going to look to go out there and impose her heavy set muscle bound body and really go out there and try to implement that grappling game plan by overpowering Angela Hill, dragging her to the ground and kind of controlling her. However, we have seen Angela Hill do some good work off of her back in terms of getting back to her feet, stopping takedowns, getting out of bad positions, especially up against the cage where it's easier for her opponents to take her down. And she does a good job of, getting back into open space and then getting back to that Angela Hill game plan, which is just try to outvolume your opponent so that the judges think that you won. And I do think in a fight here where you can pretty much flip a coin, you're getting some decent value on Angela Hill, who should, be the much more improved fighter, like I said, and has a much better skill set here to kind of nullify what Tecia Torres is going to be doing. Again, I haven't really been a big fan of Angela Hill in the past, but I do think she's slowly starting to come into her own, and I think that this is a prime spot for her to go out there as a slight underdog and pull off the upset against a fighter that already has a win over her. I think Angela Hill is more than ready for this task. I do think that she'll, be more active with the strikes, land the better strikes, and then she should be able to stay out of the way of the takedowns and the clinch control and the top pressure that Tecia Torres kind of leaned on, especially in their first fight. And even though we've seen Tecia Torres go out there and have some successful striking battles since that fight, and she does have some decent striking, she's not going to go out there and outstrike Angela Hill for 15 minutes. I'd be very surprised if that's the case. Tecia Torres looks in great shape, based on some of the fight week pictures that I've been seeing. But then again, she always looks great. So you can never really say anything bad about the physique and the shape that Tecia Torres normally comes into the fight with. But I do think that Angela Hill, like I said, much improved takedown defense, good get-up game, even more refining of her MMA striking. I think it's going to be a little bit too much for Tecia Torres this week. And I do think that we see Angela Hill go out there, out-volume Tecia Torres, and win this fight via decision. Vicente Luque versus Michael Chiesa. We got minus 110 on both sides. Steady money coming in on Michael Chiesa, who originally opened out as a plus 125 dog. The money has started to come in on him, and a lot of people believe that he should be able to go out there and defeat Vicente Luque. Now, let's break down this fight I'd say it's pretty binary in terms of how you can break down this fight. You got Vicente Luque, who's an absolutely nasty striker, but also a very good jiu-jitsu player that should be able to hold his own on the ground here against Michael Chiesa. Now, Chiesa, on the other hand, he wants to get the fight to the ground. There's no way he's going to be able to go out there and outstrike a guy like Luque, because if he decides to do that, I think he's going to get absolutely starched and hurt on the feet. Chiesa does a good job in terms of kind of nullifying the amount of damage that's given to him or thrown out to him, especially when he fights some guys that have that striking advantage. But he does a really good job in terms of, again, like I said, moving, sticking and moving, and then waiting for his shot to eventually get the fight back to the ground, which I think he's going to be having a ton of success here against Vicente Luque. Now, Luque has kind of benefited from the fact that a lot of his fighters that he's going up against are strikers as well. So he doesn't really deal with too many takedown attempts, albeit he fought Tyron Woodley and stuffed one takedown attempt from him. But that was, a very weird sequence. It was right off the bat. We saw Tyron Woodley throw some heavy shots just to push Vicente up against the cage, and then he went for a takedown immediately, and it seemed like he just didn't have the greatest technique, and not to mention, very much telegraphed in that spot. I think that we'll see Michael Chiesa at least kind of hide that takedown a little bit better than we saw from Woodley, so I'm not going to take too much from that. But again, what other fighter can you say that Luque has gone up against in his last several years that would want to grapple fuck him the way that Michael Chiesa is going to look to do? And with that said, I think that Luque will struggle with that. I know his BJJ is pretty good, and we've seen Michael Chiesa get submitted off his back, when he's on top of a guy like Anthony Pettis, so that does obviously linger in our brain, but I don't think that Luque is that good of a fighter off of his back as Anthony Pettis is, especially when Pettis is truly on his game. We've seen him lock up some nasty submissions against some high-level opponents back in the past. But I think that Chiesa is truly starting to come into his own in this welterweight division, where he's just manhandling dudes, right? He's huge even for 170. How he made 155, I have absolutely no idea. But the fact that he's at 170, really growing and maturing into this weight class, and we're starting to see that win streak start to add up. Adding Luque to the belt is not too bad of an acumen either, to go out there and have a high level fighter like that and just dominate them, which I think he's actually going to do here against Luque. Again, a bit of a concern if this fight does stay on the feet. If Luque does stuff a couple takedowns, I think Chiesa will be in some trouble. But I do think that we'll see Chiesa, intelligently land takedowns, stay away from the big striking of Luque, and really just grapple fuck him. I don't know how much easier I can put it than that. It seems like there's a fly, flying around my face, close to my face while I'm trying to do this breakdown, so I'm trying to catch him. But I think Chiesa, again, does a good job in terms of using his strength, his height, his just strength advantage that he seems to have over a lot of opponents, and then just dragging fights to the ground, and then his high-level jiu-jitsu. We're talking about high level to the point that, Michael Chiesa was able to secure a submission victory over a high-level fighter like Beneil Dariush. Now, I know it's been a little while since then. That was April of 2016, but he's been subbing some good dudes. Jim Miller, Ben Benio Dariush, Carlos Condit. He hasn't been able to get a submission in his last 3 fights, but I'm not expecting him to go out there and get a submission over Vicente Luque either. So I think we see Chiesa's grapple fucking tour continue here against Vicente Luque. I think that should be a great T-shirt, right? Michael Chiesa's grapple fucking tour. And just have the dates that he beat fucking Carlos Condit, Diego Sanchez, Dos Anjos, Neo Magny, and maybe add Vicente Luque to the mix as well. But yeah, I do think that we see Chiesa have tremendous success in terms of grapple fucking Luque here, dragging the fight to the ground and just smothering him. Will Luque give up a submission? I'd be surprised if he does, but I do think that we'll see Chiesa just grind him out over 15 minutes and take home a decision victory. Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munhoz. We got -110 on either side for this co-main event, and good God, is this fight amazing. As I'm breaking down these fights for you guys, I'm just like, oh, can't wait for that fight. Oh, can't wait for that fight either. And here I am once again saying, oh, I cannot wait for this one fight either. I know Nunes was supposed to defend against Juliana Pena. That was supposed to be the original co-main event. But even with that falling off, I feel like there's enough of a serving here from the UFC to be truly excited about the fights that are going to be going down this Saturday. And to have Jose Aldo and Pedro Munhoz co-main eventing this lot, I'm more than excited for it. So Jose Aldo, obviously, we know he's coming off of a win over Marlon Vera last time around. A very gritty win from Jose, right? Not a type of approach we usually see from him. It goes out there, wins, I believe it was 1-1 going into the second round. And a lot of people thought the momentum would be in Marlon Vera's favor, as we have seen Jose Aldo start to fade and slow down later as fights go on, especially that third round seems to be the turning point in a lot of his fights. But managed to get a backpack position or a back mount position on Marlon Vera and was pretty much able to just control him for the majority of that round. I was very surprised to see Jose Aldo do that, right? It's not often that you see Aldo go out there and grapple fuck somebody, but it seems like he's matured. He's, accepted the fact that he's no longer the Jose Aldo from WEC days, but he still has some good chops on the feet. Now, I think skill-wise, obviously he blows Pedro Munhoz out of the water in terms of striking, right? Pedro Munhoz still in that phase where it's just calf kicks, leg kicks, and heavy shots to the head. And it wasn't enough to beat a guy like Frankie Edgar, which is very weird, right? Very close fight. Could have gone either way. A lot of people thought it should have been Munhoz. I didn't think it was as crazy as a robbery as most people are making it out to be. But that's just Munhoz's game. And all of a sudden, people are thinking that Munhoz is this crazy knockout puncher. But I feel like I kind of deflated that narrative with just going through some of his knockout wins. So let's just talk about his UFC career all in all, right? TKOs, Matt Hobar. We know Matt Hobar, obviously not UFC level, obviously. I'm talking about KO finishes that he has. Brian Caraway, body kick, that's going to drop anybody. And again, Brian Caraway, not the greatest striker either, so good win for Pedro Munhoz there. Cody Garbrandt does fucking what Cody Garbrandt does, decides to go out there and sees red and just absolutely starts winging bombs. And Pedro Munhoz has the better durability, was able to just withstand whatever Cody was throwing at him, and then, returned in the fire and eventually found that chin of Cody Garbrandt and put him out. And then since then hasn't knocked anybody out. So I think that narrative of Pedro Munhoz being this crazy knockout puncher is just, it's a little crazy. He gets a couple knockouts, but he's not like this. We got to worry about that one punch that's going to put out Jose Aldo, specifically for this scenario that I'm playing out. So I do think that Jose Aldo will probably get the better of the striking. He showed great work against Petr Yan, and I believe it was at least one round where he showed some good work before he started to fade, and then eventually, got finished later in the fight. And luckily for Jose, this isn't a 5-round fight. He only has 3 to worry about with Pedro Munhoz here. But I do think that we'll see some prime Jose Aldo shit, right? I think he's going to be the much better striker. I don't think this fight hits the ground. And even if it does hit the ground, I don't think that Pedro Munhoz is that far ahead of Jose Aldo that he should be able to find a submission of any sort. Again, I think this fight's going to be competitive on the feet, but I do give the slight edge to Aldo, as he does seem to have more tools in his pocket rather than just a calf kick and some heavy punches up top. But Jose Aldo is definitely going to have to worry about that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Aldo effectively check the calf kicks that Pedro Munhoz is going to be throwing at him, because he's going to have to be very careful and very very much minding his P's and Q's, especially in those instances, because I wouldn't be surprised to see Pedro Munhoz kind of fake those leg kicks and try to go up top and find that button. Jose Aldo, like I said, he might be getting up there in terms of the fight miles, but he's still only 34 years old, right? There's so many times where we see a lot of fighters, their prime years are at 34 years old. Not saying that Aldo's going to go out there and make a run for the 135-pound strap, considering he already has, 2 losses at the 135-pound division, though that Marlon Moraes fight could have gone either way. I still think he has the chops to go out there and beat a guy like Pedro Munhoz, who I don't think, is as great as everybody is making him out to be. He's good, don't get me wrong. Is he a top 5 guy? Maybe. Top 7, probably. But I do think that he struggles with, a 2021 Jose Aldo here. So I'm taking Aldo. I'm taking Aldo by decision. Am I worried at all about his durability and his chin? Not as much as most people. A lot of people are thinking that he's just fragile and shot. I don't think he is. I think he could still go out there and put on good performances. We've seen him eat good shots from Marlon Moraes. We've seen him eat some hellacious shots from Petr Yan. It took some crazy beating, ground and pound beating in the 5th round for Petr Yan to take Aldo out of there. But I do think that Aldo can still go out there and make a good account of himself, and I'm expecting him to do that here against Pedro Munhoz. So I'm liking Jose Aldo here. Don't mind the odds either. I think there's some solid odds there. We got to pump the brakes on the Jose Aldo is washed thing. Maybe he's washed in 5-round fights, but I think in 3-round fights he could still make it competitive and still show us flashes and glimpses of peak Jose Aldo. So I like Aldo here. Going to take him by decision. And minus 120, not too bad of a betting line either. So I'm taking Aldo here, and I'm going to take him by decision. Time for the big main event. We got the interim heavyweight title on the line here between Ciryl Gane and Derek Lewis. We got the heavy favorite, minus 370 from the Frenchman, Ciryl Gane, going up against plus 300, the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. And obviously, the line always wide in Derek Lewis fights, especially when he's fighting fighters that are technically way better than them, but we obviously know that you have to take into consideration the knockout power of Derek Lewis. So let's actually start off on the Derek Lewis side of things, who's on a 4-fight winning streak right now, most recently going out there and defeating Curtis Blaydes via 2nd round knockout. That was a fight where we saw Blaydes show off his striking acumen in the 1st round, all in hopes of eventually setting up that takedown in the 2nd round. And when he did shoot for it, he made some dire mistakes, especially shooting right into the power hand and the power uppercut of Derek Lewis, eventually putting him out and Derek Lewis winning the fight. That's pretty much Derek Lewis fights from a T, right? Like, not often do you see him go out there and win decisions. He did win a decision against Ivanov and Latifi during this 4-fight winning streak that he's on right now, but it all comes down to small little segments of moments that he has of major success in his fights when he's able to rock, drop, and hurt his opponent. Sometimes he's able to get them out of there. Sometimes it's just enough damage that the referee or the judges will actually score it no matter what the opponent was doing in return, whether it was grapple fucking or absolutely just, outpointing him on the feet. But Derek Lewis just has that fight-changing power and that round-changing power that we definitely cannot overlook. But Ciryl Gane is probably the best complete fighter that he's gone up against during this run and probably throughout his career. Gane is still only 9-0 in his professional MMA career. And if you guys didn't know, actually, his first ever pro MMA fight was for the heavyweight title over at that promotion TKO up there in Montreal. And he was able to secure the title within his first ever fight. Obviously undefeated up until this point. Now he's getting a crack at the biggest heavyweight strap out there, regardless of the fact that it's the interim title. He still gets a chance to at least put his name at the front of the line to take on Francis Ngannou whenever that fight decides to occur and whenever Francis's schedule starts to clean up as well. But he brings a very intriguing aspect into this fight because he has very good stand-up, good knowledge of distance management, as well as getting out of the way of a lot of his opponent's big shots. And then he's just very well versed everywhere. Seems to have a decent submission game, decent takedowns as well. But then obviously he does the best of his work from the distance when he's able to outstrike his opponents. Now this fight is kind of reminding me of Mark Hunt versus Derek Lewis. Not in the fact that Mark Hunt is like Ciryl Gane in any way, but Derek Lewis is going up against a guy that's much superior than him on the feet, albeit not with power, but still with technical striking and the ability to kind of run circles around Derek Lewis with combinations, kicks, punches, whatever it may be that Ciryl Gane is going to throw here. This doesn't need to be a 10-minute breakdown. This doesn't need to be an 8-minute breakdown or anything. It's pretty simple. Gane has him covered in every single base except power, and we've yet to see Gane truly get cracked. I will say this, though, he has definitely eaten some good shots from Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Junior Dos Santos, and even Alexander Volkov, but nothing will really put him in, in a place to be prepared to be hit by a guy like Derek Lewis. Like, there's nothing you can do in training to truly be ready for that. You just got to be ready to try to dodge it, or at least nullify the amount of impact that is coming from it by rolling with the shot as well. And even rolling with it, that might still knock you out given the amount of power that Derek Lewis has. And I love the quote that Derek Lewis put out there recently talking about, you may be the most way more skilled than me, but I have no skills and I'm still going out there and beating you guys. So you guys should pretty much just go end up retiring. And if he's able to get the knockout this weekend, it's going to happen again. He can say the exact same thing, that he made it to the top without much real skill. The guy has just crazy knockout power. Even when you take him down, he's able to just, turn over onto his stomach, get onto his knees and elbows and hands, and then eventually get back to his feet when he decides to. Like, it just seems like he takes moments of relaxation and tries to just get his energy back, try to recharge so that he can go for another burst and try to get you out of there. But I think that Gane is going to be very well prepared for that. I think he does a really good job, especially with his body kicks, and I think that could definitely have a factor in this fight. In terms of slowing down Derek Lewis. Something that we've seen in the past is that body shots is not something that he really likes taking, and Gane just does such a good job in terms of masking a lot of his combinations and ending them with kicks to the body. I think that's kind of going to be his key for this fight. Again, maintain that distance, beat up that body, and then eventually once he sees Derek Lewis really huffing and puffing, he should be able to go in for the kill. I think he's actually going to be the best guy to go out there and take advantage of or actually nullify the amount of damage that's going to be coming his way from Derek Lewis. Once the fight hits the second and third and fourth rounds, I think he'll do a good job in terms of nullifying that attack by just avoiding and rolling with the shots and all that stuff. And then once Derek Lewis blows his gas that he was able to kind of recharge for that blitz, then we'll see Gane start to turn it up again, throw some strikes, land to the body, and then eventually get Derek Lewis out of there. My official prediction for this fight is actually going to be a third round TKO for Gane, but I think that his path of least resistance is to take this fight to the ground and seek a submission, as that's definitely a way that he should be able to get Derek Lewis out of there. Derek Lewis, not the greatest off of his back until he decides that he wants to get back to his feet and then rain hell on his opponents. So I do think that we see Gane have a ton of success. He's going to have to face a little bit of adversity, but I do think the fact that he should be able to nullify the damage. Again, his movement, distance management, all of that is great. And then he should be able to pick apart Derek Lewis and eventually finish him in the third or fourth round. I'm going to say third round, but I think my favorite play in this fight in its entirety is actually the under 4.5 at minus 180. I really like that spot, as I do think it covers both outcomes, as I do think that Gane, all of a sudden people think that he's a decision fighter, which might be true, but you gotta, really show, at least in this fight, that you can take down a wounded animal, and I expect that to be Derek Lewis once this fight reaches the later half of the second, third, and fourth rounds. But I don't even think he'll hit the fourth round, to be honest. I think Gane will probably get him out by the third. So the under 4.5. Again, I thought it was going to be closer to like minus two. Over under 2.5 or 3.5 rounds, but the fact that they're giving us a full 22.5 minutes to work with as the widely available total in this spot, I'm going to go with the under there, and I think that's probably one of the safest spots on the card because Derek Lewis's knockout power, and then mix that in with Derek Lewis's the amount that he slows down and the amount of damage that he starts giving up later in fights. Gane will absolutely take advantage of that and then eventually get him out of there. So I'm going Ciryl Gane to be the new interim heavyweight champion, and I'm taking him to win this fight by third round TKO. And those are the breakdowns. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you guys haven't already, make sure you guys hit that like, hit that subscribe. And if you guys want to show your boys some more support, hit up the Patreon. Link is in the description below. $5 a month. Best value you're going to get on the market, not to mention the amount of analysis, time, and content that I throw up on there. I'm sure you guys will really much enjoy it, not to mention the Discord community, which has just been absolutely great for me. And shout out to all those guys out there. And then lastly, Coolbet, coolbet.com. Make sure you guys use promo code MMALOTN2 and then match your initial deposit up to $200. So if you're looking for a new bookie, look no further than Coolbet, because they have great perks that you guys can take advantage of once you guys sign up with them. So once again, Coolbet, coolbet.com, use promo code MMALOTN2 and then match your initial deposit up to $100. All right. I'm going to be off to visit the in-laws, a couple provinces over starting Friday, and then I'll be back on the following Saturday. So I believe that's August 15th that I'll be back. No UFC August 14th week, but I'm still going to be looking to spend some time while I'm out there in Saskatchewan, researching a couple fights, maybe putting out a best bets and props article for the August 21st event, which I'll actually be at. So I can't wait to go out to Vegas for that August 21st event. Have some fun things planned for when I'm over there. So don't want to reveal it yet, but once we get closer to the time, I can't wait to drop it for you guys. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Got a couple other things coming out this week, so make sure you guys keep your eyes peeled. And yeah, that's really about it. Good luck on your bets this weekend, and I'll see you guys throughout the week.